And I'm like Gemara. The Gemara for Purim is that Yud Amar Aleph. We stopped at Tesla Base. Quickly summarize for you what's happening. Levi came along and said there should be one more case in our Mishnah. And our Mishnah talks about a case where that the Yevamos is also to you, and so the Tsar is also to you as well. And we go through 15 different cases. He said there's one more. What about if it's your mother? If it's what happened was that Reuven, let's say Shimon, Shimon married this woman, had a daughter, didn't marry her. Shimon forced himself upon a woman and had a daughter, and then the daughter, what do you call it? Was married then to Reuven, and then when Reuven died, that daughter obviously cannot go to Shimon, and because it's his daughter, and therefore, Reuven will. Here's a case of a woman who cannot marry her brother-in-law, so the tzara also goes free. You could have said just that case, simple enough. Okay, so that's what Levi's question was. He was attacked viciously by none other than than by his Rebbe. Rebbe said to him that you're asking a question that doesn't make sense. And he said basically because we don't talk about things where there is an argument. Anything which has an argument, we're not going to talk in our Mishnah. So that's basically what happened. Okay, and why is that? Why is there an argument here? Because the only case it can be is as follows. This is what happened. Let's say Yaakov married Leah and gave birth to Reuven. Okay, Yaakov had a normal son, Reuven. Then Yaakov forced himself upon a woman and gave birth, let's say, to another woman and gave birth to Shimon. And Reuven now went ahead and married his father's victim. Obviously, Reuven cannot marry his father's wife, but he married his father's victim. So he married his father's victim. That victim is the mother of Shimon. So now Reuven is allowed to marry that woman, even though she was living with his wife, because it wasn't a wife. He was forced upon himself. So now that Reuven passed away, Shimon should marry her, but he can't because of his mother. So here's an example, another case of a Yevama that's forbidden, and therefore the Tsar law is forbidden. But the problem is the only way that Reuven can marry this woman is if this woman was not a wife of his father. Doesn't matter if it's his mother or not, but his wife or father, but rather it was forced upon himself. But Abu Yehuda disagrees. Abu Yehuda says that anybody had relations with your father, regardless of whether it was a kedushin or not kedushin, it's also to Reuven. So this case could never have happened according to Abu Yehuda. And therefore, Rebbe says we don't want to talk about a case because we don't talk about arguments. So we had a number of cases in the Gemara where you might have said, "What are you talking about?" We do mention arguments, and then each one we dismiss. That's the next parak, or what Abu Yehuda says is not correct. Okay, so now the Gemara says here. We'll start from here. The Gemara. Well, we have 4 lines at the top of the Testament base. What we're going to try to prove here is that there is a machlekes in our Mishnah, and it's mentioned based on a ruling of Rav Chia. Rav Chia goes on to say the following. He goes on to say that all of the cases in our Mishnah, you can have a following scenario. We have an interesting scenario. You have, let's say, 4 brothers, and 2 brothers married 2 sisters, and then these 2 sisters, when they now come on to the next 2 brothers, Reuven and Shimon married 2 sisters. When they die, and Levi and Yehuda cannot marry either one. Why not? Because each one is the sister of not of his wife, because they didn't marry it, but of the one who was supposed to become his wife. It's called Achois Kukase. And with Rabbanon, it doesn't look right. So therefore, the Rabbanon said, I don't want you to marry either of them, but you do have to give a chalitza, because technically they're not really the sister of your wife. Each one can marry their own. So Rabbi came along and said that each of these cases we have these 2 sisters marrying 2 brothers, we can have a case. He says that we can have a case where where the following says, I can find a case here. Interesting. So the Reuven and Shimon, those 2 wives of Reuven and Shimon, right? So in the case of Reuven and Shimon, they cannot marry Levi and Yehuda because they're 2 wives or sisters. But I'll tell you when they could, says up here. In each of these cases, if one of those 2 sisters is forbidden to one of those brothers, then the tzara is permitted. No, she doesn't disqualify the tzara because she has no connection to Levi. For example, if this if this woman, there are two sisters, and one of them is the mother-in-law of Levi, and one of them is the mother-in-law of Yehuda, so then for Levi, as far as Levi is concerned, there's only one woman available. And as far as Yehuda is concerned, there's only one woman available. So it's not the sister of somebody else that's connected to him, and therefore they could marry. So every case in our Mishnah, you can have that situation. And you can have a situation of sister-in-law. That's what he says. Comes along and we define now exactly what he means when he says every single case. So we're saying, what do you mean every case? As follows. But I can say you have a case. Each one of these cases of two sisters, we're talking about two sisters. In every case, you can have an example where it's also to one to Levi or to Yehuda, and the other one is mutter. And therefore, the other woman, remaining woman, since she's no longer the sister of somebody's tied to you, you can either cheletzes or misyabemis. Now he didn't spell out which cases. He just said that. Comes along and even says, not all cases is applicable. It's only shaykh mitargim mechamoise ve'elach. It can only be from chamoise and onwards. Abel shitza b'babidrosha. He says the first case is impossible to have. What the first case is? Your daughter and your granddaughter. It's impossible. Why in my time? But why is it impossible? Because the bita ba'ointzim mishkacha has been suyin le mishkacha's law. You cannot have a case like that. What's that? For example, Reuven forced himself upon Sarah and gave birth to Rachel, and then Shimon forced himself upon to Sarah and gave birth to Leah. Now Shimon is allowed to marry. It's not his brother. Shimon is allowed to marry Reuben's wife, but it's not Reuben's wife. This is a victim of Reuben. So Reuben, had a daughter from this woman, and Shimon had a daughter from this woman. Right? And then Levi went ahead and married Reuben's victim, and Yehuda went ahead and married Shimon's victim. So now when Levi and Yehuda die, they have two sisters left behind, right? But neither sister can marry Reuben. So each sister, one sister cannot marry Reuben because it happens to be one sister is forbidden. What happened was that the daughters of Reuben and Shimon married Levi and Yehuda. So the daughter of Levi, the daughter of Reuben married Levi, and the daughter of Shimon married Yehuda. So now that Levi and Yehuda died, Reuben cannot marry his daughter; he's only available to the other one, and Shimon cannot marry his daughter; he's only available to the other one. But how is it possible? How is it? How is it possible for Shimon to marry the victim of Reuben? If it was Reuben's wife, even if Reuben divorced her, Shimon cannot marry. The only way that Shimon and Reuben can both bear children from the same woman is the only way that Reuben and Shimon can bear children from the same woman and have a situation of the daughters being sisters is only if it's a victim, right? It's only if she's an anusa, and we follow the opinion of the rabbis. So therefore, Rabbi Yehuda says, our Mishnah is not talking about victims, our Mishnah is talking about normal cases of marriage. But only talking about a case of marriage, and marriage is possible. If Reuben married a woman, there's no way that Shimon could then go ahead and marry that woman, even if Reuben divorced her. And unless Reuben died, but we're talking about Reuben and Shimon still alive, and then the ones are going to be marrying Levi and Yehuda's wife. It happens to be their daughters. Lambaye says, I have no problem. Well, who said our mission is only to my marriage? But he says, even if it happens through a man who forced himself, doesn't matter, as long as the cases are there, as long as it's there. If the only way you can explain it is by the Reuben forced himself onto the woman, so therefore Shimon can also live with this woman, fine. And if it's a case of marriage, then be good. But the case of Eishes Achiv that was not in the world, like in the case, remember the Chacham hold that if when Reuben died and left behind childless, and Shimon was only born afterwards, or Levi or Yehuda, was only born afterwards for them, it's always also, I don't care when he was born, he can never ever marry Reuben's wife. So there's never a case of this newborn to be involved that it's mutter to him. There's never can be mutter. It's always also. My time, and what's the reason why we don't include that in this rule of Rab Chia that you can have a case of two sisters, mutter to one and us the one. It can never be mutter to the kid who was not born then, but Rab Shimon would work. Even Rab Shimon who was mishkach as well, the Rabban the mishkach as well. The plukulikamadi, we don't get involved in arguments. How does it fit in Rab Shimon? I'll tell you in a minute. According to Rab Shimon, you could have a case of two sisters, and then you have two brothers that came along, both born later, and you can have mutter to one and asa to one. How's it possible? According to Chachamim, both brothers are born later are asa to everybody. are also to any of the previous what do you call it, Yevamos. How is it possible? According to Reb Shimon, it's possible. The Gemara will explain. Reb Safra says, no, I'm going to include that because I'm going to follow Reb Shimon. It's a machlekes, so what? We're following a lone opinion. And that's going to be the Gemara's question. So we see clearly from here that if you learn like Reb Chia, that every case in our Mishnah can have a case of two sisters and mutter to one of the remaining brothers and also to the other one can apply to every case in our Mishnah. In the only way you can learn it by Eshazach if you follow Reb Shimon who holds, and Reb Shimon is only a lone opinion. So we see that our Mishnah can also follow lone opinions. So why did Rebbe accuse Levi of being foolish because he learned something which is a lone opinion? What's wrong? Now, what's the case of Reb Shimon? I'll tell you how we find Reb Shimon. B'shisa Achid with three sets of brothers. There's Reuben and Shimon, there's Levi and Yehuda, and Yisachar. What does Reb Shimon say? Reb Shimon holds that if a kid was born after Reuben, let's say Reuben died, and then a kid was born. So right now is the time of Yibum. The kid was born, but he wasn't around when the Yibum started. So then this woman is us to him forever. Even if she ends up marrying another brother and then that brother dies, she cannot marry this kid who was born because once it's an Isser labeled upon her or leveled upon her, it's us forever. But if he was born after Shimon married the Yevama, it's no longer considered Yevama. Now it's Shimon's wife. So then if Shimon dies, he is entitled to be a Yevama. So this is the case. There were 6 brothers, Eliba de Reb Shimon. There were 6 brothers, Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yisachar. Reuben and Shimon married to 2 women, and then Reuben died. And when Reuben died, Yisachar was born. So when Yisachar was born, Reuben already died. So therefore, Yisachar is also to Reuben's wife forevermore. Doesn't matter what happens to her. So Levi marries Reuben's wife, and even so, she is also in the future to Yisachar. Then Shimon died, and then Yehuda married Shimon's wife. Yisachar, if Yehuda dies, Yisachar can marry Yehuda's wife, no problem. But then a kid was born right before Yehuda married Shimon's wife. This second kid who was born, which is Zvulun, cannot marry Shimon's wife because he was born after Shimon passed away, before Yehuda married. So now you have a case where Yisachar cannot marry Levi's wife because she's really Reuben's wife, and Zvulun cannot marry Yehuda's wife because really Shimon's wife. So those 2 sisters, then if Yehuda and Yehuda die, those 2 sisters end up now with Yisachar and Zvulun. One sister is permitted, Levi's wife, which is Reuben's wife, is permitted to Zvulun because he was born after already Levi's married her, but forbidden to Yisachar because he was born before Levi married her. And Yehuda's wife is permitted to Yisachar because he was born before it all happened, before even Shimon died. But the Zvulun cannot marry because he was born right after Shimon died, before Yehuda married him. So that's what do we see? It's a lone opinion, yet the Mishnah studies it. I'll tell you very simply. The reason why Rebbe attacked Levi is because Rebbe doesn't believe what Reb Chia's klal. He made a klal about who said, Reb Chia said every case in our Mishnah, you can have a case with 2 sisters and it's permitted to one brother and forbidden to the other brother. Who says? It's Reb Chia said that. Rebbe doesn't agree with that. And therefore, you don't have to learn that our Mishnah is following Reb Shimon, because Rebbe holds there are no machlekes in our Mishnah. Fair enough. I want to say that maybe Rebbe agrees with all of these klolim. He agrees with the general rule, but he says, however, that in the case of the anusa, it cannot be. Why can't it be? This is what Rebbe said to Levi. You want that the Mishnah should include the case of anusa. It can't be because it doesn't fit into this klal. Why doesn't it fit in this klal? Because anusa's in the case of the anusa of your father, you'll only have one of these examples, but you won't find both examples. No, there's 2 things up here said. First of all, that 2 sisters are going to be available to 2 brothers, and there's a mitzvah of yibum. And the second thing he says that you have a situation where one sister is mutter to one brother, and the other sister is also to this brother. In the case of Anusa's Aviv, it's impossible. What do you mean it's impossible? So he explains. Why is that? Let's say the 2 possible scenarios. Let's say Yaakov was ma'anis 2 sisters, right? Yaakov forced himself on Rachel and Leah, and each one of them had a son. So now you have 2 brothers, right? You have 2 brothers who are the sons of Rachel and Leah. And then Yaakov had another two sons from another wife. So you have now Reuben and Shimon and Levi and Yehuda. Reuben and Shimon were Yaakov's, sons, let's say normal. And then you have Levi and Yehuda, who were Yaakov's sons from two sisters. Now these two sisters ended up marrying Reuben and Shimon, right? And according to Rabbi Yehuda, they're allowed to marry Reuben and Shimon because they're never the wife of their mother. And so now, but each one of them, Reuben's wife is the mother of Levi, and Shimon's wife is the mother of Yehuda. And then what happens? They die without any children. In this case here, so you have two sisters, right? You have Reuben's wife and Shimon's wife with two sisters. So in this case, you have two sisters who have the din of Yevamos to Levi and Yehuda. But the problem is that one of them is permitted to Levi while the other one is also to Levi. Is not true, because they're both forbidden to Levi and they're both forbidden to Yehuda. Why? Because each one of these sisters is the sister of your mother, and the law is that the sister of your mother you're not allowed to marry. So you can't have a case of muteres lezeh, asudas lezeh, or asudas muteres lezeh in the case of the Yaakov forcing himself upon two women who were sisters. It's impossible, unless you're going to learn they were not sisters, right? So there's no issue then on, let's say, Levi. Levi has one of the women, Shimon's wife is Levi's mother, but Reuben's wife has no relation, so Levi can marry her. But then, in that case, how can that be? So how is that possible? If let's say Yaakov married two separate sisters at all, completely, sorry, two different girls, and what do you call it? So then they're not sisters. Then you'll find, yes. So Reuben's wife is forbidden to Levi because his mother, but Shimon's wife is permitted, and vice versa. But they're not sisters. So the other part of Rabchia, which is the sister, you don't have it at all because they're not sisters. So therefore, it's impossible. That's why he said to Levi, "You're foolish." Says about it further. It comes on the Rashi says, "I'll tell you better." Rebbe doesn't agree with Rabchia. There's all these rules, so therefore you can't force yourself to learn that the last part of the Mishnah is Rav Shimon, and really there are no arguments on Mishnah. Or maybe you plug them out. Maybe there are arguments, but not because of Rav Shimon. So what was he attacking Levi? Levi came up and said, why don't we also include Anusas Aviv? If your father forces her upon somebody and then married Reuben, so Shimon, the child, cannot live with his sister-in-law, which is his mother, and therefore the Tzaddik also, why don't we include that? For another reason altogether. Because the author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda holds that you cannot marry the Anusa of your father. How do we know the author of our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda? This is what he said. Levi, you should have realized that the author of our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, and therefore case is not possible. My time and you should have learned from the Mishnah, the Masnisi, our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda, our Mishnah, Rabbi Yehuda. The Osar Ba'anusas of our Mishnah clearly is followed by Rabbi Yehuda, who believes that nobody can marry their father's relation, even was forced upon. We learned Sheish Arayas Chamudas. Maybe you learn later Mishnah that 6 Arayas, like your mother, your grandmother, your mother, is much worse than the ones in our Mishnah. Why? All the ones in our Mishnah are only forbidden to one of the sons, his mother-in-law, his daughter is only forbidden to him, but to everybody, all other brother siblings is permitted. But your mother is forbidden to all the siblings because even if it's not their mother, it's their father's wife. So therefore, they're strict to those arayos. They're strict. They're also to everybody, and because they're also to everybody, their tzaras are permitted. If they married another person, their tzaras are permitted. She says here, Victoria, 6 arayos, which are even stricter than this one. And because they marry other people, because they marry strangers, therefore that stranger's co-wife is permitted to any of his children. And who are they? Ima, his mother, the Ashes of even and the wife of your father, the sister of your father. Now they're also to everybody in the family, all siblings. Now my Ima, what's the difference, your mother or the father's wife? If your father's wife is not your mother, and it's also, so obviously your mother's also as well. Also, your mother's also your father's wife. Why are we adding your mother? Somebody married to your father, is that the same as your father's wife? Elalav, when we say your mother, we mean anusas of it, a victim of your father. And yet we're saying that what? That is forbidden to all the siblings. This follows the view of Rabbi Yehuda, that you're not allowed to live even with the anusa of your father. Uktani, he says the only reason is why you're allowed to marry, why others allowed to marry because they married to others. Lachedim mean but none of your brothers can marry her. Man Sham, ladies, who holds that's opinion of Yehuda. The Asa Banusas of he holds you're not allowed to live with a woman that your father consorted with, even if you raped her. So the author of Mishnah of Yehuda, obviously, you cannot learn this additional case of Anusas of it because the author of Yehuda he holds that it's not shaykh because none of the brothers could have married her. A question. The Rabbi Yehuda, even according to, let's say the author of Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda, so what? So what the author of Mishnah Rabbi Yehuda? Rabbi Yehuda holds that none of the brothers should marry the victim of their father. But it's only allowed. It's not chorus because it's not really your father's wife or your mother. So it's only allowed. If it's only allowed, what happens if the brother did marry her? They're married, because if you marry a chayv of somebody you're not allowed to live with, you're still married. You need to get anything else. You're married, and there would be a mitzvah of yibum because the mitzvah asay of yibum pushes away the loisasa of the fact that he married anusas aviv, and maybe you don't do yibum, but you do chalitza. So you could have learned in our Mishnah. Levi's right. Even according to Rabbi you have the e of Avanasi didn't listen, and he went ahead and married her. Rashi answers the e like Tani. Our Mishnah is not talking about cases where you breach the law. We're talking about cases of chatchili. You married somebody that you're legal allowed to marry. Then Rashi turned around and said, thinking about that, I have another question. Even out of cases, I can find you the following case. What happened is a very interesting case. Yaakov honors Kalose. Yaakov raped his daughter-in-law, his son's wife. And he had a grandson. So he had a grandson. Now this grandson now is a brother of his father, and the brother-in-law, the brother of his father, and the brother-in-law of his mother. And the mace, Reuben, and then his father died. Since he's a brother of his mother, he should be marrying his brother-in-law. But obviously he can't because his son. And so since she obviously cannot live with her son, her brother-in-law, neither is it tzara. It's a Rosh Hashanah. So we could have added this case to the Mishnah. On Malay, said to him, you know why we don't have a case? Because we're talking about cases which are legal, not cases which are illegal. Bachwasa that Teda come out. We're talking about cases which are legal. Bachwasa the Sudla come out. We're talking about things which happen against the rules of the Teda. Says the Gemara, despite everything, and despite the harsh words of Rebbe, he said, you don't have a brain in your head. Levi maintained his opinion, and he varied the Mishnah. Bava became Bodka Levi Masit, and Levi wrote a number of brises, and in his brises, which he parodied the Mishnah, he actually added that 16th case. The Torah Levi Ima, his mother, his mother sometimes exempts her tzara, sometimes it does not exempt tzara. Sometimes it does not exempt the tzara. In other words, the mother's not shaykh at all, so therefore you just because none of the brothers can marry her, and therefore the tzara, has to so exempts the tzara. But sometimes she doesn't exempt the tzara. When doesn't she exempt the cases? If the mother was your father's wife, even married a brother from the father's side, and then he died. This is a case of a mother that does not pater her tzara at all, because they should never have married. They should never marry. You're not allowed to marry your mother. And if he went ahead and he married his mother, the kedushin will never chal, because we know when it comes to chayode krisis, if you marry somebody that Torah says you get kares for, even though he went through the whole motion of marriage, nothing happened. So if one of the brothers married his father's wife, there was no marriage. And if there's no marriage, then if he dies, the other woman is the sole technical wife, and therefore there's a deal of yibum. But what happens if hoisa imay anusas of it? But what happens if the father forced himself upon this woman? So then we're going to follow the chachamim. The brother could have married her. So then there's a case where that there's a din of yibum there. And because the brother is her daughter, therefore there's no yibum and exempt tzara as well. Because she is technically married to Reuben, because we follow the view of chachamim. No, Levi learned in our Mishnah, even though it's an argument, he learned the opinion of chachamim. So even though our Mishnah clearly states only 15, there's actually 16. Like this case is. So Levi did maintain his opinion that we should include the case of somebody the father forced him on, and Shimon was her son, and she ended up marrying Reuben, and we follow Chachamim that Reuben's allowed to marry her. Okay. The Levi, according to Levi, the Omar says the Inamik Tani, so Levi has no problem that says about even the E. Remember, the author of our Mishnah is Levi, and Levi included in the Mishnah is Brisa version of the Mishnah. The case where the father forced himself upon the woman. Now, how can you do that if the author of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda, even according to Levi? It must be that Levi says, look, our Mishnah is talking about a case. If it happened, even according to Rabbi Yehuda, Reuben should never marry his father's victim. But if he did, there is a marriage, because it's only allowed. So it says Rabbi Yechon. According to Levi, the Amr says, listen, I have another case we can learn. A case, once you tell me you can talk about Averis as well, then I have another case of an Averis, an example, where there's a valid marriage, and therefore, since she cannot marry one of the brothers, the Torah is also permitted. And what's that? Listen, in the following case. This is the big machlek of Yechon Lakish. What happens? Okay, so Reuven died, left behind a wife, and maybe there were a few brothers there. There were 4 brothers there, and Shimon went ahead and he gave Yibum and he married. What do you call it? He married this woman, Reuven's wife, and or he gave her chalitza. You have 2 choices: chalitza or Yibum. According to the Shlakish, whatever Shimon does has nothing to do with the rest of the brothers. As far as the rest of the brothers are concerned, it's Reuven's wife, and for them, if they live with her afterwards, for them there's an Isser of Karas. Only one person has a mitzvah, and the rest, nothing changes. Everything is status quo. So what happens, according to the Shlakish, the other brothers have Isser Karas. According to Rabbi Yechon, this brother who marries her or gives a chalitza is doing it on behalf of everyone else. So everyone else no longer it's an Isser of Karas, because it's as if they all gave her Yibum or they all gave her chalitza. Now, what happens in the case where you gave a chalitza? Once you gave a chalitza, it's in the pasuk asher lo yibna bayis, you're no longer going to build a house. So therefore, you have now a lav that if afterwards you decide to marry her, finish. You're ready. You've had your chance and you've missed it. What happens? Shimon gave chalitza to Reuben's wife, and then Shimon decided to marry her. You're not allowed to. But what aveda did he do? He did only allow. He did not do a karis. He did only allow. But according to the Shlakish, all the other brothers, for them, it's still karis to marry her. So what happens if then Shimon dies childless with her? She cannot marry any of the other brothers because she has an Isakaris. And therefore, she exempts the tzara. Here's another case we could have learned in our Mishnah. Once you're telling me a person did an Aveda, here's another case. Says the Shlakish. Even in case of Ehil mentioned, at least then why don't we say so why don't we include the case that somebody gave chalitza to his sister-in-law, and then the chazan of a kitchen they decided to marry her, which he shouldn't have. He's over allowed. And he died below Bonim, and the rest of the brothers cannot marry her because for them there's an Isser Karas. And since she is forbidden to the rest of the brothers with Karas, so too the Tzara, her co-wife, is usher to the rest of the brothers. So here you have another case now. A Mishnah could have added a case where not only the Yibum is usher, but the Tzara is also usher. Rabbi Yechon disagrees. Rabbi Yechon holds that all the other brothers are also just allowed. And therefore, she could marry technically all the other brothers. Therefore, the other tzara has to marry one of the other brothers. She cannot get out just like that, or chalitza. Amalei, so Rabbi Yechon, however, answers, one thing for sure, remember our Mishnah also continues and says, and what happens if this woman decides to marry another brother, which is legal. But in your case, Shlakish, it's not legal for her to marry another brother. Because the fact, even according to you, it's not legal because according to you, there's an Isser of Karis for all the other brothers. And because there's an Isser of Karas for all the other brothers, she cannot go ahead and marry anybody else. So our Mishnah is talking about cases, not only the Tsar's also, but also the Tzara of the Tsar. Says the Gemara, why does the Rebbe just say to him, I hold that all the other brothers only have a lab, and the Chayavi Lavin, they definitely have to marry her. And I say the Chaloisa said, the only reason why we don't marry her by a Lavin is because we're going to be a Shnia to be the Shaina. So Gemara said, you're right. But the Dvaram Ka'amalei, Rabbi Yechon said to Rish Lakish, me, the whole thing doesn't bother me at all. Because why? Because she is not exempt from Yibum or Chalitza because she can marry all the brothers only a lab. She needs Chalitza. So the Amish are talking about a case where the woman is forbidden to the other brothers. This woman is not forbidden. It's only a lab, and the Asay will push it away. When is it forbidden? When there's Karas. But Lididi, Chayv Elabane. They're only Chayv Elabane, the rest of the brothers. Chayv Elabane, Chalitza Yibnun. And therefore they have to give her Chalitza. Matreda Yibum. And we don't want to give a yibum only chalitza. El Yidach, and therefore the tzara also has to marry or give chalitza. El Yidach, according to you that you believe that chayav krisa, you're asking a question. Why doesn't the Mishnah include it? Because you cannot learn the last case that she can go and marry another brother. Because we want to continue with the say tzara, the co-wife of the co-wife. It can't go on. Now we're quickly going to explain the machlekes of Yechon Lakish. If somebody, let's say, gives chalitza to his sister-in-law, then the chaz of the kitchen, he went ahead and he married her, and he should never have married her. Who einu chayv ala chalutza kares? Shimon will no longer has kares for marrying this woman because once he gave her chalitza, he took away from her the fact that she's a sister-in-law. He took that away from her. So it's no longer the Isser of kares. But the Torah says that Shalom Yibn the Bayis, once you have a lav now to marry her, once you give a chalitza. Koris. But Achim, the brothers, they remain the same. Chayovin ala chalutza koris. They will get koris if they live with her, because the chalitza, they never gave her chalitza. As far as they're concerned, it's still Reuben's wife. It's their sister-in-law. They're allowed to. But when it comes to the co-wife, Bain who? Bain Achim Chayovin Alatzar Koris. When it comes to the co-wife, since you didn't give her chalitza or yibum only to one woman, the other woman remains the same. Koris to everybody. That's Rish Lakir's opinion. Rabbi Yochanan says, no, I believe that whichever brother is designated to do the yibum represents them all, and whatever he does affects them all. Bain who? Bain Achim Ein El Chayovin Lo Yachalutza Koris V'Lo Yalatzar Koris. That this woman who goes ahead and gets yibum does on behalf of the co-wife as well. So the co-wife no longer has koris if she lives with one of the brothers. And all the brothers, the brother who married her gave a chalitza represent all the other brothers. So none of them have koris anymore. My time is Lakish. What's a larger Lakish? Oh, Makra. It says in Pasuk, Asher lo yibna bayis, if somebody doesn't go ahead and build a house, even though he doesn't build the house of his brother, Kivan shalai bona, once he didn't build the house of the brother, nobody gave chalitza, shuv lo yibna, you can no longer build. It says a singular build. Who builds? Whoever's the one who's giving chalitza or yibum. So ihu the koibala yibna, only he has the iser that he didn't build because he gave chalitza to build, so he's the only one that no longer is kodesh. But the other brothers were not involved. For them, everything remains the same, status quo. Reuben's wife is still forbidden to them, and they get kodesh. Hot tzara, when it comes to the tzara, since nothing was done to the tzara, and the woman that you did give place to is not representing the tzara, is kedekayim mekayim. The tzara remains exactly the way it always was. Rabbi Yochanan disagrees. He says, mi ikam midi, the mikara. Every one, first of all, both of these wives, he had a choice to marry or give chalitza, and all the brothers had that choice. So all the brothers are involved in this relationship, and both of the wives are involved in this relationship. Midday, is it possible? In the beginning, you want to have a choice. Then you can marry either woman. And now you want to say that they get karis for it. A minute ago, every one of them had the title to marry her, and now you tell me they get karis? No. This person is doing the brother who's giving the chalitza or yibum is doing on behalf of all the other brothers, and he and she shlichusa the tzaddik of that. Whoever's involved in receiving the chalitza or the yibum did on behalf of the other co-wives as well. Rabbi Yochanan asked Shlokish a question. He asked a question from a brisa that seemed to support him that there's no courage for the other ones. What's the story? It says in the brisa, if somebody gave chalitza to his sister-in-law, and then the chalitza kid decided to marry, but you shouldn't, because the bias, once you didn't build a house, too late. But he did. But Mace, and he died. It says clearly, now the other brothers have to step in because Shimon died childless, and they have to give chalitza. Now, according to the Shlakish, for as far as the other brothers are concerned, there's an East of Karis to live with her. So there's no mitzvah of Yibum or Chalitza there. Why is the Bride say Chalitza? But if you follow Rabbi Yochanan, it makes sense. Because Rabbi Yochanan says that all the other brothers also has been reduced to a lav. And reduced to a lav, you have to give Chalitza because Mehatayra, the Asay, pushes away the loises. It's only the rabbis who don't want to marry. So be Shleim, I mean, I say Chayovin lav, and you know that all they have is Chayovin lavin, and it's only Chalitza Menachim. That you need Chalitza from the brothers. But according to you, I might say chalitza. Shimon married her because Shimon took away the chorus and was made a lav. And because he made her a lav, he became his wife. He shouldn't have married his sister-in-law once he gave her chalitza, but he did. It's married. But the brothers can't marry because as far as they're concerned, it's chorus. That's his question of the Shlakish. That's a good question. But look at the next half of the brisa, and you see it actually supports me. But the time is going to you. Aim safe. Look at the next half of the brisa. It says, one of the other brothers went along. The teacher decided to give her. Okay, nobody has to marry Shimon's wife. But one of the brothers did and gave her. You have to give her chalitza. But what happened? According to the brisa, the other brothers have to give chalitza to Shimon's wife. That Shimon first gave chalitza to, and then he married if he shouldn't have. And now he died. One of the other brothers gives chalitza to this wife. What happens if they decided instead of chalitza to marry her? It says ein lo alav klum. The marriage did not take effect. So he asked a question. You, Rabbi Yochanan, say the only Isser is a lav. We know that if you marry somebody that there's an Aveira, you're not allowed to marry, the marriage is still a valid marriage. You still need a divorce. It's only if you marry somebody that there's a chiv of karis. So the Brisa says that if one of the brothers went ahead and married this woman, there's no marriage. Doesn't that support me that they, as far as they're concerned, there's a chiv of karis? You know, if all it is a chayav lav, and why do you say there's no marriage at all? Rav Shesha says, you know why? Because Seifa Asr Rabbi Kiva. The safe of the Brisa follow. There is a view we'll have in Ksubis and other places Rabbi Kiva holds that marriage does not take effect even if you just marry a chayv v'lav. If a kohen, for example, marries a divorcee, there's no marriage at all. Not that there's a marriage, but it's a sin. There's no marriage at all. That's Rabbi Akiva's view. It's a lone view, and he holds the fact that produce a mamzer in that case as well. So that's Rabbi Akiva's view. We don't paskin like Rabbi Akiva, but maybe this brayse is the second half is following Rabbi Akiva. The Amar, it says, Ein Kiddushin Toisim B'Chayav. The first half of the brayse says Shimon is married to this woman. So obviously we don't follow Rabbi Akiva. First half of the brayse says Shimon gave a chalitza, then he married her. But it's a lav. According to Rabbi Akiva, it wouldn't have been a marriage. So the first half of the brayse is not Rabbi Akiva, only the second half of the brayse. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, it should the brayse should have spelled it out. That according to Rabbi Akiva, nothing happened, because the first part of the brayse he found the Rabbanon. If you suddenly swap to Rabbi Akiva, who argues, you should say, but according to Rabbi Akiva, the other brothers, if they proceed to marry her, nothing happened. So kasha, we have a problem in this brayse. How are we going to resolve this brayse? And Rabbi Sheshan answer, we don't know like. So the cooking Gemara says, Rav Ashi rules like Rishlaki that the other brother is not allowed to marry her. He's an Isa of Karas. So therefore, the second half of the brayse makes sense. The problem is the first half of the brayse. How is the first half of the brayse saying that you have to give her chalitza? What do you mean? So he will explain the brayse that the brayse, when it says that you have to give her chalitza, is talking about Rav Shimon, a brother who was born after Shimon married her. And because according to Shimon, if you're born after Shimon married her, it's Shimon's wife. So as far as you're concerned, it's Shimon's wife, and therefore you give chalitza. Ravina holds like Rabbi Yechanan that one of all the brothers only have a lab, and therefore they have to give her chalitza. But how you can explain the second half of the brayse that says that there's no marriage? And explain that the second half of the brayse that there's no marriage is talking about brothers who were not born. And if you follow the Chachamim, I don't care when they were born, for them there's an Easter of courage, because the chalitza never helped him. Since they weren't born at the time when he gave chalitza, it didn't help them at all. So it doesn't matter when they were born, it's still considered Reuven's wife, and therefore for them there's an Easter of courage. Because he can't say Shimon did it on behalf of them, because he wasn't around them when Shimon did it. Ravashi saw like Rishlaki, that all the brothers just finished the line. That all the other brothers have courage, Matar, so Shimon, and he looks at Shimon, that if somebody gave chalitza to his sister-in-law, then the chaz of the kitchen, then he married her. You require chalitza from the brothers. What do you mean by for them it's Isa Karas? No, for one brother there's no Isa Karas. For which brother no Isa Karas? The one that was born after Shimon married her. Man achin hayiludin, the ones who were born after Shimon married her. So now with Shimon's wife, and therefore he doesn't. As far as the newborn kid, he doesn't have any connection. This woman has no connection to Reuben at all. It's Shimon's wife, and therefore he has to give a chalitza. Kiman kilab Shimon like Rab Shimon. The next part of it says the teacher says in the next part of the Brayse that if you gave kedusha, nothing happened. That's one of the ones who were born before. As far as they're concerned, there's an Isa of Karas. The teacher ain't level klum. There's no marriage here at all. That follows a shlokit. For them, there's a chiv of Karas, and there's no marriage. And Adina holds like Rabbi Yechanan. That what all other brothers concerned is a lab, and therefore they have to give a chalitza, and he will answer the last part of the mission. So like this: if somebody gave chalitza to his sister-in-law and then married her, you have to give chalitza to the brother, because as far as they're all concerned, there's only a lab here, and a lab, the mitzvah even overrides it because asad der chalitza said, but you give chalitza. Man achin haneladin, all those that lived already before, kiman holds only have a lab. But Amar Echad min Hayiludin b'Kitcha, but if one of those who were not born yet comes along and gives kedushin, ein la olav klum. As far as they're concerned, whatever Shimon did, whatever and follow the Rabbanan, that the kid, whoever's born later, is usher forever, and whatever Shimon did doesn't help because he wasn't around when Shimon did it, and therefore whatever Shimon did didn't help. It's as far as the newborn kids, it's still Reuven's wife, and for Reuven's wife, there's an Easter of courage, so there's no marriage. Okay, we'll stop here. Everyone have an easy tonus.